This is the Hot Take Hockey Podcast with your hosts, Lucas and John Viveiros.
So this is the full three-way deal. We'll get it right into it. Columbus acquires Ivan Provorov. So he kind of goes from the Flyers through the LA Kings. The LA Kings retain 30% on Ivan Provorov. And this is just the juicy part of it. The Philadelphia Flyers, so they, obviously Danny Briere running the show now, and Keith Jones in there as well. They get a 2023 first round pick that was originally LA's from the Gavrikov and Korpisalo trade. So that's number 22nd overall. They get an LA Kings 2024 second round pick, and they get either Columbus's second round pick in 2024 or 2025. The Flyers also take on the contract of Cal Peterson. I think it's around $5 million for 2 more years. So that one was tough to offload. I mean, to give the viewers and listeners a reference point, I'm pretty sure Edmonton for 2 years of Cassian at like 3-something had to give up like a couple second round picks or something. The Leafs had to give up a first round pick for the last year of Patrick Marleau. So that's just reference. So that's massive for the Flyers. They also bring in Sean Walker, defenseman, and prospect Helgi Grans, I believe is how you pronounce it, who's a 6'4" defenseman. Pretty intriguing there. I think he was a former second round pick around there. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Second rounder.
And then also just throw in there, the Kings also bring in, I forget if, Lucas, did Kevin Connaughton end up in Columbus or LA?
He ended up in LA, Kevin Connaughton,
Okay.
yeah.
And then Hayden Hodgson as well. But to me, man, I mean, this for me with LA is more so just what's to come, whether it's re-signing Gavrikov or making other moves. So we can talk about LA and their future here going forward and dumping Cal Peterson. But let's focus on the Flyers and Blue Jackets, because I think right now, I mean, I'll just say I was like, man, the Jackets, Kekalainen getting Provorov at 4.7 for 2 more years. That's a dub. But what do you think of the trade, man, when you saw it?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many pieces, man. These are two, specifically Philly and Columbus, are such interesting teams. I feel like we're going to be talking about and watching all offseason. Let's start with Provorov going to Columbus. I think that shores up somewhat of a need for Columbus. Their blue line's pretty thin. Obviously, they moved out Gavrikov prior to the deadline, right? So they needed to definitely get a piece there. Provorov, I feel like at this point in his career, we almost sort of know what he is now. That word potential's sort of gone out the door, and we kind of know.
Yeah, being 26,
right. You kind of know what his high end is if he can get there, and he's sort of stifled in Philly, so it's good for him to get a fresh change. Going to be interesting to see him on a Columbus Blue Jackets team that's rumored. It's not 100% confirmed yet, I don't believe, but with Mike Babcock coming in, definitely interesting to see him there.
To go from Tortorella to Babcock,
right? So yeah, that's interesting for Columbus, and that's the big piece they get. That's all they get, right? I mean, when you look at it from that perspective, them giving up I feel like they did give up quite a bit to acquire Provorov, at least from my perspective. I'm a little down on Provorov compared to what I was a few years ago. Yeah. So I would say overall Philly gets the haul, and obviously they have to eat that Cal Peterson deal. But I don't think Cal Peterson is necessarily an AHL lifer. Like, he can rebound and maybe become a decent 1B or maybe a backup. And it's not a great contract to have him on for that, but he's not necessarily just a piece that you don't want on your NHL roster. He might turn out to be something again. He had some good stretches with LA before last season. So I don't want to write him off completely. But I like Philly overall, the whole package they get. They get Sean Walker, who will slide in on the blue line for them with Provorov going out. They get the prospect that was drafted in the second round, like you said, Grans, who's he's a big D. He's like 6'4", I believe, 6'4", 2 something.
We know the Flyers love their bigger defensemen too, right?
Yeah, and all these draft picks.
Yeah,
come on, man. Philly had a haul here. I think Philly gets a big dub for this one in my eyes.
Yeah, no, I agree. The only thing I'll say about I think the perspective here is the Flyers making this type of move, and this is where I think Flyers fans should start really warming up to the idea of Briere going in this direction, and what he said in his presser and when he got introduced is then commit to this mentality. Absolutely commit to it, because now the Flyers bring in a first, 2 seconds, and at the end of the day, it's not like they added additional cap essentially. They lost the Provorov contract at 6.75. They bring in Walker and Peterson is basically a combined 7.5. We'll say. I think Walker's 2 point something, and Peterson is around 5. So you bring in around $7 to $8 million of cap. So you bring an additional like $1 million of cap, and you get first and 2 seconds. I'll battle you on this Columbus argument, Lucas, because we got to spice it up. I think what the Jackets did here, if you look at the overall perspective, so they had 2 pieces that they believe are not going to come back in Korpisalo, Gavrikov. They get a first and a 3rd round pick. So essentially what they've done here is they added themselves into this deal because at the end of the day, the Flyers, their mentality in this deal is they want to get draft capital. They want to get prospects. They want to get younger. They want to go through a rebuild. The Kings, their purpose here was they just wanted to do anything to dump the Peterson contract. They've been trying to do it since the deadline. They were willing to attach a 1st round pick. And I mean, basically here they attach a 2nd round pick, Walker, and they retain 30% on Provorov. So it becomes a little complicated. For Columbus, as I said, they lose the 1st and 3rd, or sorry, they get the 1st and 3rd in that trade with LA at the deadline, and they only move a 1st and 2nd here. So essentially they get, if you want to look at it in a weird way, they get Provorov for Korpisalo and Gavrikov.
And if you look at it from that perspective, that's a dub because those guys were going out the door and weren't going to re-sign, right?
Yeah.
Like that's where you're going with it, right? I mean,
exactly. And and right now, the rumor right now is Gavrikov's getting well over 5, potentially 6 mil. I don't know who today threw out the 6 mil number. But if that's the case for Gavrikov and you're getting Provorov at 4.7 for not even just this year, for next year as well, for 2 years, you get Provorov for 4.7. I look at it this, Lucas, even if Provorov doesn't work out for this next year in Columbus, but when I say workout, I think Provorov's still going to be a top 4 guy. He's got some size. He's got skating ability. When teams look at that at the deadline, say Columbus is not in a playoff position or even close to it, you're going to get a lot for Provorov potentially because it's not a rental. Teams love that. Love the fact that you're not even acquiring a rental. You're acquiring a guy that will have team control for the following year. I mean, Lucas, once upon a time, the Leafs did exactly that with Jake Muzzin, and they had to give up freaking an arm and a leg. Remember the 1st round pick and a couple prospects, Grunstrom. So for me, if that's Columbus's mentality there, where they bring in a guy that's going to help them immediately in the top 4 and potentially going to be a big time trade piece once again. And I mean, I'll just say this right now. Columbus is building quite the defense core. They already got Werenski there. They've got Adam Boquist. They've got Jake Bean. Now they bring in Provorov. They've got Andrew Peak there as well. And this is just at the top of my head. They've got like 3 or 4 prospects that are going to be top 4 guys easily. They just drafted Matachuk. They have Juracek as well. They just drafted. So that's 2 guys. They have Kulemans, who I think was like a former, I don't know if he's a 1st or 2nd round pick around there. And they also have Svozil, who teammate of Connor Bedard in Regina. That guy's projected to be a top 4 guy as well. I just listed 4 guys that have strong projections to be top 4, including Juracek, as I said, and Matachuk, who have strong projections to be top pair defensemen. And as we just said, they already have Provorov and Werenski now. I mean, Lucas, man, Columbus is building a defense core.
It shows you why they're an attractive team for like Babcock to want to come join. And just, overall that decor looks like something to behold in a few years, right? I mean, that's looking like they're building the team from the blue line out, and that's unbelievable. I think overall this deal, John, for me, like there's not really, you always want to go, who's the winner, who's the loser. I really like what Philly got with the overall package, but for what it did for each of the clubs in this deal, I think it's a dub because LA, like we talked about at the top, is going to use that cap space to either keep Gavrikov or address the net if Korpisalo leaves. So that helps them. Columbus gets Provorov and Philly, overall, I think Flyers fans might be a little bittersweet on this one because they're getting a lot. I feel like there's a lot on paper there that they're getting for their asset in Provorov, but when it's a drafted talent that they've had since he was 18, and he didn't exactly pan out the way that, I think early on in Provorov's career, he was, on a trajectory of, could this guy be a top 10 defenseman in the NHL? Like literally, I think people thought that. So I think from that perspective, it's a little disappointing, but with Provorov's stock being, I feel like the lowest it's been in his career is probably right now.
For a few different reasons.
Right. For a few different reasons we don't have to get fully into, but because of that too, Philly gets a good package here. And now they just got to use those picks and maybe hit on 1 or 2 of them. And it'll be a good one for them. But Cal Peterson's going to be interesting because we can sort of segue into this idea of these Carter Hart discussions that have happened today. Right after the deal came out with Provorov and with Cal Peterson coming in now, it's another goaltender you're bringing in. And with rumors that Carter Hart his name's out there, What is your initial reaction to that? And Carter Hart maybe being shopped by the Flyers?